So this morning's subject is building bridges in social life. It may appear to be a bit strange, rather obscure topic for discussion. How to live a happy inner life and at the same time to have happy interaction with people living around us from a spiritual Vedantic point of view. That's the idea behind. Now, we all look for success in life. This is the general understanding in all traditions, in all cultures, in all belief systems. We all want success. Success in material life. Because success, we believe, will give us happiness, will make us happy. And also we search for a meaning in life at a higher level. To begin with, we look for happiness. And we believe that happiness is linked to success in whatever we do, in whatever we achieve. Now, how do we find happiness? Through success, that is true. But we find that all successful men and women are not necessarily happy. At least, success as we understand in its limited, narrow sense, achieving something in the secular, material world, in terms of worldly achievements. We do not always find the successful men and women are not necessarily happy within. And this search for inner happiness is linked to another search, a search for a sense of meaningfulness in life, meaningfulness in what we do, what we achieve. In fact, that is the important line of demarcation between the human beings, the animal kingdom. The animals are happy if they get shelter in a very cold weather, if they get food. That's enough for them. Human beings also, to begin with, will need all these things. But once they achieve this, then they look for a higher kind of happiness. Well, it may not always be higher if that happiness is linked to worldly pleasures and worldly achievements. And then begins the search for meaning in life, meaningfulness in life. At a higher level, we start thinking of what's the meaning of life? How does this life end? Is life just a journey that begins with birth and ends with death? It's a terrible thing. Just think of it. If we all imagine that our life is nothing but just a journey, a movement, a flow from birth to death. And death, by all practical implications, is just a disappearance of this physical body. If this physical body is all that we are, then there is no end to misery. Again, then there will be no necessity for morality or ethics. If this body is all that we have got, then why should there be morality? Why should there be ethical values? By stealing and murdering and committing crimes, if we can make money, and if that money makes you happy, and if that happiness is the only thing that we must search for, then human life itself is not very different from the life of the animal kingdom. In this context, I can just draw your attention to a very important statement found in the well-known spiritual classic, which contains the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, I should tell you something about Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was the great teacher of probably one of the greatest intellectuals of 19th century, Swami Vivekananda, whom Professor Wright, while recommending Vivekananda to the Parliament of Religion that was held in 1893, described as one of the greatest learned men he had ever met in his life. And he was a famous professor of the later part of 19th century in the United States. And this Sri Ramakrishna was his teacher. And this Vivekananda, at the end of his life, said that whatever he did good for the world, whatever he knew, any good thing that he ever said in his life, he all got it from Sri Ramakrishna. Now, Sri Ramakrishna deals with this topic that we are discussing now. What's the meaning of meaningfulness of life, success in life, happiness in life? He says, all achievements in material life, wealth, success, money, great reputation, a well-paid job, great status, social status, and so on, they are all like zeros. All these zeros become meaningful. See, if you put 1 zero, and if you put 1 to the left of the zero, it becomes 10. Once you put that 1 to the left, then you can add any number of zeros and they multiply in their value. But if you remove that 1, then all these zeros, maybe 1 billion zeros, is not different from 1 zero. Absolutely nothing. So, Sri Ramakrishna says, all that we achieve in our life, money, wealth, any kind of secular, worldly pleasures, achievements, they're all necessary. They may be necessary. Today, in today's world, we cannot preach to the general public a philosophy of total renunciation. Perhaps it may not be understood. So, we have to be practical even when we teach the highest spiritual truths. So, Sri Ramakrishna was very practical. So he said, let all days zero remain to the right side, but there should be 1 single digit, 1 or 2 or whatever may be, other than 0 to the left. Then these zeros become relevant, meaningful. They become useful. Otherwise, they are of no use at all in our life. What is this 1 that we put to the left of the zeros? According to Sri Ramakrishna, it is spiritual values. Search for higher transcendental truth. In the conventional religious tradition, we call that reality by the word God. Here, I must tell you, because of the troubled times, even God is facing a hard time these days. God may sue for compensation for the bad name that people have brought to his name today. That's the worst tragedy of it. Many people believe that God has rather failed. God has become irrelevant. You know the famous book, God is Not Great. So, I have to explain what Sri Ramakrishna meant by God. That's very important. That's of supreme relevance and importance. God is one divine spiritual truth that is present in all of us, in everyone, even in the hearts of those who deny God. God is present. God is not a thing, a being who creates this world and then lives, maybe stays somewhere in the celestial regions with a heavy stick in his hand, supervising our actions, threatening us with eternal damnation if we violate his least, smallest instruction, and will promise us heaven if we blindly follow him. God is not such a thing in Sri Ramakrishna's perspective. God is the supreme reality who lives in all of us. God is the God of the whole humanity, the whole creation. God, in other words, is a kind of anthropomorphic term for a kind of spiritual, universal humanism. We can never hate anything in this world or any creature in this world and worship God. Our worship of God, our contemplation of God becomes meaningful when we become better human beings, when we become more broad-minded, more compassionate, and more kind-hearted, even towards those who deny God. That's the relevance of a great statement that Sri Ramakrishna's disciple made in one of his speeches. He said, well, you live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you do not accept him. Because God is not a being whose ontological existence is miserably dependent upon our recognition of his existence. In other words, God is love, compassion, not only towards those who belong to our tradition, our understanding of God, our definition of God, or the institution, the organization to which we belong. No. We can never even hurt or do harm to an ant or a fly or a plant or a seed or a tree or pollute the water or cut down trees. Do any act of violence or hatred towards anything in this world if we sincerely worship God. It is that kind of God that Sri Ramakrishna was referring to. Now, if we put this idea, this spiritual idea, that God is present in all of us, God is the immanent reality, and once you realize this truth, you become better human beings. We all become better human beings. We all become more humane. This is the relevance of what Sri Ramakrishna said, that there should be a 1 to the left side, and then you may put any number of zeros. Then life becomes meaningful. Then life gets a relevance, an importance, a significance. Then life becomes worth living. Otherwise, once we make some progress, achieve something great, then we may find ourselves approaching a dead wall. And then we sometimes degenerate into cynicism or pessimism. Now, that's why sometimes it is said, with all actions, we must keep this idea in mind. So, how to bring this idea into our daily life? That's the next problem. We all work. We have to do our duty. When we do our duty, when we work hard with all application and concentration, we want to achieve success. We want to achieve perfection in what we do. Now, in normal, ordinary human life, what happens when this spiritual element that we referred to earlier is not present? Even the highest degree of perfection may not make us understand or give us a sense of meaningfulness or relevance or or real significance of our life. When we achieve something great through action, when we aim at perfectionism in whatever we do, we may apply all energy and time and organize all our resources, external and internal resources, money, wealth, reputation, your goodwill, all these are external resources. Our concentration, our ability to focus on a single task, these are all internal resources, energy, and so on. All these we apply on one single focus, and we achieve what is technically called perfectionism in work. But that perfectionism is all right so long as we are striving to achieve that. Once we achieve that perfectionism, then what next? So what next after success? What next after achievement? Suppose you become the most successful, maybe the richest person in the world, the most powerful executive perhaps. But even that person had a darker side to his life. If he doesn't add this one to the left side of the zeros. As I mentioned, you have to remember Sri Ramakrishna's statement. All material achievements, worldly achievements, everything, wealth, money, power, reputation, everything, are all wonderful. When you have this spiritual ideal behind, to the left of the zeros, these are all zeros, but they are 1 billion zeros and 1 zero are the same, emptiness. But when you add one digit to the left, which is other than zero, then becomes meaningful. Now, how do we add this one digit to the left of the zeros? So Sri Ramakrishna says, we have to link ourselves to a higher ideal. As I said earlier, when we link ourselves to the work at hand to achieve the highest perfection in our work, in the task that we have undertaken, we may succeed. But after we have succeeded, again, the mind looks for a higher meaning. Because the most successful, the most powerful human beings in the world, as I said earlier, are not the happiest, because they do not find a real inner meaningfulness of life. So, what we have to do is, when we work, we have to link our mind to the task at hand, but we must also realize the transitoriness, the ephemeral nature, the impermanence of all these worldly achievements. It should not make us lazy, lethargic, or negligent, or indifferent to duties and responsibilities. It should not make us run away from duties and responsibilities. No. But it should enable us to face duties and responsibilities, realities of material life, with higher intelligence, with a new intelligence, with a new perspective. And that perspective is achieved by linking ourselves to a higher ideal, other than the worldly perfectionism or success. So the ability to attach ourselves to our duty and responsibility when we are living in this world, at the same time attach ourselves to a higher reality, helps us to avoid the problem of success. Because success, as I said earlier, sometimes and mostly leaves a void vacuum behind. Because the most successful men and women are not the happiest, as I said earlier. So when we attach ourselves, link ourselves to a higher spiritual ideal, then we will be able to face the problems of life with greater and higher intelligence. Now, This is sometimes achieved through the practice of karma yoga. That's one important instruction that Sri Ramakrishna used to give to his disciples. Sri Ramakrishna was a great mystic. So people from different walks of life used to go and visit him. Some of them were learned men with very high education. Some of them were young, spiritually oriented seekers of truth. And there were many businessmen among them. There were housewives, professionals, people from different walks of life. And all of them got something from him, because he was always positive. Now, in one context, some people who were engaged in different worldly duties and responsibilities asked him one question: how do we achieve inner happiness? How do we bridge the gaps? How can we enjoy happiness, harmony, and peace within, and also happiness and harmony in our interaction with others? So he said, you do your duty, do your duties and responsibilities, but at the same time, along with that, you should go to some secluded place. It could be a church, it could be a temple, it could be a hermitage, anywhere where we can think and ask the question, well, for 6 days of the week, I'm working hard. 13 hours a day, maybe driving 4 hours these days. But what do I achieve? What's the meaning of life? So this thought, it helps you to link yourself to a higher dimension of your own personality. So we need not be indifferent to his actions. We need not be negligent. But along with that, while being engaged in this action, we must ask the question, will all these things remain forever? That may help us to link ourselves to a higher spiritual truth. So, action and contemplation. Action will help us to be successful in the traditional conventional sense of the term. Contemplation can help us to look beyond success, because, as I said, success is not enough to make our life happy. And happiness, if you search psychologically for the meaning of true happiness, happiness is nothing but harmony and peace and tranquility within. It is also linked to harmonious relationship with people living around us. If we are happy within, then we won't be disturbed in our interactions with other people. So sometimes, whenever we discuss these points, many of our friends, they will ask questions. There will be elaborate discussion. How do we do that? How do we link our mind to a higher spiritual dimension? How do we go beyond the worldly achievement, success, and depression and unhappiness that may remain intact even after succeeding in life? And so on. Now, here, there is a great problem. We are trying to analyze the working of our mind with the same tool with which we analyze a computer, the functions of a computer or a machine. A machine or a computer or any human-made machine is within our power. because it borrows intelligence from its maker. We program our intelligence into a machine. So we know very well how that machine is going to operate. We can predict how it is going to work. Even the most complex machine can be manipulated because it borrows its intelligence from a human being. So human being can predict and be sure how a machine, a most complex, complicated machine is going to function. But we can never predict how our own mind is going to function next minute. We can never be sure what thought is going to emerge in our mind next split second. So sometimes what we do in spiritual life is a very serious problem, and psychologically is a very, very profound, serious, real problem. We try to analyze our mind with the same hermeneutical tools, epistemological tools, logic, analysis, inference, direct perception, testimony, and so on. All the logical tools, scientific tools, which are at our disposal, we try to employ to analyze our mind, which is really the most foolish thing that we can ever do, because we can never be sure how our mind is going to function next minute. You can be sure how a rocket that you launch to the space is going to function for the next one whole year in its journey to the Mars or some other planets. But our mind, we can never be sure. Here the problem is this. Before we start the spiritual journey, we try to analyze how our mind is going to function tomorrow, or maybe after several years. If we meditate, then what will happen? If we pray, then what will happen? After 1 year, we pray, then what will happen? The moment we start praying, even for 1 hour, within 1 hour, our mind will be different from what it is before we start praying. If we read a holy book, serious spiritual book, and imbibe its ideas seriously, and contemplate on those ideas, within 1 hour, you find our mind has changed. Before we went to the library, our mind was functioning one way. Within 1 hour of sitting in the library, reading a spiritually illuminating book, our mind has started functioning differently. Because as the mind imbibes ideas, spiritual ideas, its function also changes. But we are today sitting here trying to analyze with our present mind. Before going to the library, we are analyzing how our mind will function after reading the book, after praying. That is the most foolish thing. That's the only word we can use for it. So, there we have to remember. See, when we take a few steps, our own mind evolves. You take the first step, and after finishing the first step, our mind has become spiritually charged. It has made some changes. It has moved ahead, it has grown, it has evolved from what it was before we took the first step. When we take the 5 steps at the beginning, before we take the 6th step, the mind has become spiritually better equipped to take the 6th step. So we should remember, we should never try to prepare a complete roadmap in spiritual life. We can do that with GPS system, but not with our own mind. That's why Sri Ramakrishna made an interesting statement. There is a special reason why I'm quoting Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna was not what he called traditionally an intellectual, not a preacher in the conventional sense, not a professor of philosophy. But he was the one who inspired so many professors of philosophy in 20th century, including Toynbee, Will Durant, William James, many innumerable, Einstein, Gandhi, and all these great men. He could inspire. And they all learn from him. So he says, in spiritual life, the first thing we have to do is to take the first step. And once we take the first step, our mind will gradually learn how to take the next step, second step. So we should never try to make a complete roadmap in spiritual life. Therefore, we have to link ourselves to this higher spiritual dimension. How do we do that? By practicing unselfishness in our actions. Unselfishness is the common word that we can use. When we do something in our life without expecting anything in return, anything that's noble, that is helpful to others, perhaps without their knowledge, without looking for anything in return, that moment our mind suddenly gets elevated to a higher position. This we can practice in our own life. Maybe the most committed workaholic industrialist or professional can practice this. Those who work very hard with a definite plan, great executives, management specialists who work with a great plan, with a great application to make sure the company produces, maybe company makes enough profit. Even such people can practice. Do something unselfish, noble, for the good of others. You get a kind of inner joy from that unselfish act, which you won't get even if you make $1 billion profit in that year. That's why many billionaires do some kind of philanthropical activities, because they're looking for this inner joy or inner peace, tranquility, which they cannot buy for money. So Sri Ramakrishna says, unselfishness is the tool with which we link ourselves to this transcendental spiritual dimension of our personality. Because when we become unselfish, we transcend the present physical and psychological or psychophysical dimension of a personality. We try to evolve, we try to link ourselves to the transcendental spiritual dimension of a personality. Because if we are only this body, why should we be unselfish? There's no, only a fool will be unselfish if he thinks he's only the body. Because then there is no, as I said earlier, if we interpret ourselves as the physical body, and if we define our life as a journey that begins with birth and ends with death in a cemetery with a piece of stone, or a journey that ends when the body is pushed to that tube to be burned in the crematorium, if that is human life, then why should you practice unselfishness? Morality and ethics. Of course, the policemen are there to enforce it. Otherwise, people won't do anything noble. They won't practice ethical values and moral values. So, the point is this. Once we try to practice unselfishness, then we transcend the present psychophysical dimension of a personality, and we experience this spiritual element in our personality. We reach the spiritual dimension of our personality. And then we find true meaning of life. As I said earlier, a person, to give an example, a person, let us say, he works very hard or she works very hard for good of others, or maybe does a little once a week, few hours, working for the good of others, with charitable institution or any kind of activity, without giving her or his name in the newspapers as a great philanthropist, and without making hard bargain for that position. No, nothing. Without perhaps other people becoming aware of the good deeds that she or he is doing. Without accepting or expecting anything in return. Absolutely no expectation. Out of that, that person derives a kind of inner joy. It's called unselfishness. It's an expression of unselfishness, which transcends the person from the psychophysical to the spiritual dimension. Because that person suddenly realizes the presence of the immanent spiritual reality within. Suppose that person starts taking a salary, maybe $1 per week. That person was getting a lot of spiritual joy by dedicating one whole day for the good of others, unselfish service for others. As a test case, a laboratory test. If that same person starts expecting $1, that is nothing, in expectation for one whole day service, he will lose it or she will lose it. So any kind of selfishness will crush this inner joy and happiness. And even the simplest, apparently most insignificant act of unselfishness will produce this inner joy and happiness. So human beings start evolving spiritually only through the practice of unselfishness. Biological evolution is no more possible, but spiritual evolution is possible through this practice of unselfishness. The Vedic literature says it is this unselfishness that preserves life in this world. There are innumerable statements in the Vedic literature. Some statements are very, very interesting. Look at the trees. They exist forever. They give shadow to people walking in the hot sun. They can take shelter from the hot sun under the shadows of a big banyan tree. They take water from the earth, give shadows, give fruits. You cut down, it doesn't resist. Very symbolic description of the patience, unselfishness of a tree. That is true of all the whole creation. Many such interesting stories are there. So that's why it is stated that unselfishness is the real path for spiritual life. And according to a tradition, it is this unselfishness that takes us the highest spiritual goal. Now, in Vedic tradition, there are three central principles that are examples for this unselfishness. They are three dimensions of the same truth. Ritam, Satyam and Dharma. These are the three terms. In Vedic tradition, sometimes they are used as synonyms and frequently they are used as different Ritena, Satyena, where they are equated. One is an adjective, the other is a noun. Ritamcha, Satyamcha, where they are distinguished. I won't go into those aspects. So Ritam, Satyam, Dharma. You know Dharma, which Buddha preached. Dharma is the central principle which Buddha preached. What is Dharma? Dharma is morality. When we cut down trees, that leads to deforestation, climate change, famine, loss of rainfall. It is adharma, sometimes it's called. Any act that violates the principle of unity of existence is adharma. It means opposite of dharma, opposite of righteousness. Untruth, falsehood, anything that violates, that upsets the balance, that creates problems, a ripples, a disturbance in the cosmic rhythm, the cosmic harmony of existence is adharma, the opposite. So the ethical dimension of this transcendental truth is called dharma. So we should stick to dharma, which means we should stick to the higher spiritual, ethical, moral principles. That is Buddha's teaching. Why should we do that? Because if we violate dharma, the principles of dharma, it violates the cosmic rhythm, cosmic harmony of existence. As I said, if you construct a dam in the river, it blocks the flow of the river and may perhaps lead earthquakes and many other imbalances in nature. As I said, if you cut down trees or through high emission of poisonous gases, it can lead to climate change, it can lead to some kind of imbalance, disturbance in the harmony of cosmic existence. So that aspect is called rhythm. The principle that keeps the entire universe in a harmonious, coherent rhythm without any disturbance. The harmony behind the cosmic existence is called rhythm. And its metaphysical, philosophical dimension is called truth, it's called Satyam. Now, the Vedic literature says we transcend the present physical and psychological dimension of our personality, the limited aspects of our personality, and we link ourselves to the unlimited, infinite spiritual dimension of personality when we practice this dharma. Because by practicing dharma, we are recognizing the fact that the world is one, existence is one, we cannot do any harm to anything in this world without simultaneously doing harm to ourselves. When we hurt anything in this world, we are thereby hurting ourselves. Because we violate the cosmic harmony. We disturb the harmonious existence of creation. Now, one important method of achieving this means linking ourselves to this spiritual dimension of a personality, is prayer in Vedanta scriptures. Prayer has got one advantage. Anyone can pray. Meditation may not be that easy. If you try to meditate, all of a sudden, see if you had 13 hours of work and then driving, immediately start sitting meditation, then you'll be meditating only on the office work, people whom you have interacted with, the traffic problems on the way, and so on. So meditation is a very subtle process. It needs a lot of preparation. Of course, meditation as a relaxation technique is fine. But a higher spiritual meditation under cosmic reality needs a lot more preparation and psychological fitness. The prayer is both the kindergarten and also the PhD of spiritual life. Anyone can begin with prayer. And the highest spiritual seekers were also examples of the efficacy of prayer as a spiritual practice. But Vedic scriptures laid down the central principle. Prayer, to be a spiritual tool, should be done in solitude. Because the highest prayer is a silent prayer. Prayer in silence. So prayer should be done in our own inner chambers of our own heart. In solitude, when we pray, we suddenly realize that we do have a trans-physical, trans-psychological, a spiritual dimension to our personality. That is why there is a statement in the Gita, Maija Ananya Yogena Bhakti Ravyabhijarini Vivikta desha sevittum anabhirjana samsadi. The meaning is this: those who practice most pure, highest devotion, they have a natural liking for solitude. That's one aspect of this great famous verse, the Bhagavad Gita. So, that prayer can help us to link our present state of mind to its transcendental dimension. And one great danger to this prayerful attitude is often to be referred to. Sometimes we come across ideas that could create disturbance in our mind. It is called a kind of iconoclastic ideas, which frequently interpret spirituality as a mere concept or an idea. So, in spiritual life, in building bridges in spiritual life, one important point to be remembered is we must take examples and teachings from those who have either studied these truths in a proper traditional way or those who have experienced these truths in their own life. There's a great danger of interpreting spirituality as a mere concept or a doctrine, which completely leaves out the experiential aspect of spirituality. Spirituality is not a concept or an idea or a doctrine. It is essentially a matter of experience. But ideas and concepts that are enshrined in books written by great spiritual teachers who had experience will be a great help. They are like guiding posts in the traffic, which help can take us in the right direction. Otherwise, what happens? Holding to nihilistic, iconoclastic ideas can only create a kind of psychological anarchy in our mind. That's the main problem in modern times. Putting things in a simple language, 5 direct, easy methods to spiritual realization, which anyone can practice any day. These are all wonderful things to read. When you find these books in the Amazon, you have temptation to buy them. But they won't be of much practical use because spirituality is also a science. Spiritual life is also a scientific process. We don't listen to anybody who says that Einstein was wrong, Newton was wrong. No. I shall interpret a new doctrine of relativity, which is different from Einstein's. We don't listen to that person. So, if somebody comes forward and tells you that I am going to teach you a new doctrine of theory of gravitation, which Newton did not, or rather failed to discover, we don't listen to that person. Similarly, in spiritual life also, there are great scientists in spiritual tradition, both in Occidental, in the Western, and also in the Oriental traditions. The great Vedic sages, Buddha and others, and also the great mystics of different traditions, Christian, Jewish, and so many traditions, or Hindu, Buddhist traditions. They are the Einsteins and Newtons of spiritual world, spiritual science. The tendency to strike a new ground, to demolish all their theories, and to project a new idea, and putting things in simple, best-selling books in easy, intelligible English, that has become a fashion. That very often creates intellectual anarchy. So that's one point that great thinkers like Vivekananda in modern times, Aurobindo, Vivekananda, others have pointed out. Spirituality is also like a science. Scientific theories are born in the laboratories, in experiments. Spiritual truths are also born in the laboratories of our spiritual life. Scientists did research in laboratories. The great sages did that in their solitude. Search for truth in the external world is science. Search for truth in the internal world is spirituality. So, the main difference is in science, we can verify in identical conditions. In identical situations, we can verify and we expect identical results. In a way, in Yoga and Vedanta also, the same scientific principles do apply. The requirements are different, needs are different, prerequisites may be different. So that's why great teachers in modern times have pointed out this aspect. We must listen to great truths written in ancient books, then use our intelligence and then try to practice. Belief is not spirituality. Belief and conviction are not spirituality, different. After all, we believe in something which we are not experienced. That's what happened. Maybe appear to be contradictory. We don't believe it is daytime because it's so obvious to us. When we use the word believe or conviction, we are dealing with ideas which have not become our experience, but obvious to us intellectually, but not necessarily experienced. We do not have to believe in something that we have experienced. So belief is only the beginning of spiritual life, not the end. So belief should lead to our own inner practice, and that takes us to experience. So that's why spirituality is nothing but a universal spiritual humanism based on inner experience, the experience of the same supreme immanent spiritual reality within all of us, an entire creation. So I have tried to point out some aspects of using spirituality as a tool for bridging gaps in social life. So we will have interaction. At that time you can have your questions for discussion. So thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.